Do you believe Trump is just an ordinary politician? What if someone claimed to have seen Jesus and received a revelation about his role in America's spiritual destiny? In today's video, you'll hear the shocking story of a truck driver who died for 13 minutes and returned with an urgent message. Like, subscribe to the channel, and comment here which city you're watching from so we can connect on this journey. My name is David Harris. I'm 53 years old. I've been a truck driver for almost 3 decades, crisscrossing this country from end to end. I've seen a lot. Accidents, protests, abandoned churches, lost young people. But I never, ever imagined I'd see what I saw when I died on a highway near Amarillo, Texas. It was dawn of the day, March 12, 2025, and I was on my way to deliver a load in Arkansas. I was exhausted. I'd had little sleep, and I trusted that strong coffee would be enough to keep me awake. But in the middle of the road, in the desert darkness, my body shut down. The truck went off the road. I slammed into a concrete barrier at 85 miles per hour. They said after my heart stopped for 13 minutes. But what I saw during those 13 minutes has no logical explanation. I left my body, saw the smoking wreckage, and my own face smashed into the steering wheel. But then it all vanished. I was sucked into a thick, dense darkness, where nothing existed except a presence. Then a light came on. It wasn't like sunlight. It was alive, conscious. It was him, Jesus. He didn't say hello. He said, "David, the time has come for you to see what is hidden." When Jesus touched my forehead with 2 fingers, my spirit was thrown violently into a gigantic oval room. But it wasn't made of marble or glass. It was made of time, prayers and choices not made. In the center of the room sat a presidential chair. It floated above a spiral of light and shadow. Above the chair was the name Trump, written in letters that changed color, sometimes gold, sometimes coal black. I saw a man sitting there. It was Donald Trump, older, with a heavy expression, his eyes red as if carrying a weight no man should carry. But behind him, angels and demons fought, with spears made of words, memories, pride, and intercession. Yes, intercession. It was as if every prayer offered by someone in the United States took shape and became a weapon of light. But every curse, every hateful comment, every poisonous social media post also transformed into ropes trying to bind the president's hands. Jesus said to me, "Trump is not the savior, and he is not the Antichrist either. He is the divider, the blade. He separates hearts. What is inside people will be revealed through him." And then I saw it. Every time Trump made a decision, 2 paths emerged. In one, the Christians prayed, and the demons retreated, screaming. In the other, the Christians fought among themselves, and the angels, in tears, dropped their swords and retreated. The battle was decided by the knees of the righteous, not by the ballot box. It was there that I understood. Trump's presidency is not the end. It's the mirror, the test, the apocalypse of the American soul. Jesus looked at me and said in a voice that made the ground of eternity tremble, "They think that everything depends on who is in power, but they ignore who is on the throne." After Jesus spoke, the ceiling of that spiritual room parted as if it were made of a veil, and then I was lifted to a height where I could see all of America, not on a map, but alive, pulsating, like a heart about to have a heart attack. In the middle of it, there was a colossal figure, the Statue of Liberty, but she was on fire. His robes dissolved into black smoke, and in his other hand, where a torch had once been, was now a broken scale. The words truth and justice were scratched in blood. The blazing flame rose to the sky but gave no light. She consumed. I asked Jesus, "What is this?" "This is what's going to happen," he replied, with tears in his eyes. "That's what's happening now, but few see it." And he showed me up close what was behind the flames. The divisions of the people. I saw churches split in half, pastors using platforms as political pulpits, Christians shouting at each other with such hatred that their faces turned into masks of beasts. Every word hurled at a fellow believer was like an arrow striking the flaming statue's chest. And then I saw the political map of America, but he was all raw, as if he were a human body being ripped apart by the lines between blue and red. And the more they argued, the more the body bled. I saw crowds idolizing Trump as a messiah, and others cursing him as a demon. And Jesus cried out, "Neither of them sees the truth, because the spirit of deception has taken extremes. Trump is not the Messiah, but he is not absolute evil either. He is the reflection of what you have allowed to grow in your hearts. The words pride, fear, self-righteousness began to appear in the air like smoke around the country. And then, the ground began to crack literally. A spiritual earthquake split the country in half, starting in Washington and spreading like a crack in shattered glass. America was in spiritual collapse, but no one saw it, because everyone was too busy, fighting for power and reason. And Jesus said to me, Trump will bring judgment, but not because of who he is, but because of what he reveals in others. The vision changed again. I was transported into the United States Capitol, but not as we know it. This one was made of ancient stone, with columns that pulsed like veins, and a ceiling where constellations moved in circles, like gears of divine time. In the center of the hall there was a hidden altar, covered by black and red veils. No one in the physical world seemed to know it was there, but in the spiritual world, it was the heart of everything. Jesus walked up to him with me and said, "This is the altar where decisions are sacrificed, not for wisdom, but for influence." Upon it were blood-stained parchments and names of leaders, judges, senators, and yes, Trump's name was there too. But his name appeared strangely, shrouded in light and darkness at the same time, wavering as if something invisible was vying for his fate. And then Jesus showed me angels trying to write decrees of justice, but being prevented by demonic hands that fed on gossip, on slander, on believers who cursed instead of interceding. I saw Trump in prayer. It surprised me. He was kneeling, crying. Behind him, I saw two paths, one of false glory and destruction, and the other of humiliation, repentance, and redemption. But which one he would choose was still uncertain. Jesus said to me, "The altar is not the problem. It is who feeds the altar that defines the future." And then I saw something more devastating. Millions of Christians taking their votes to this altar as if they were offerings to a political idol. Some were blindfolded. Others were completely naked without realizing it, exposed inside. My people are trying to elect a king, when what they need is to bow down before the King of Kings. High above the spiritual dome of the Capitol, a flaming inscription appeared, "You cannot serve two masters." And then, from the altar, purple smoke appeared that rose into the heavens and began to cover the skies of America, like a fog of confusion. The chaos would not come from outside. He was already being released from inside. I shouted, "What will happen to my country, Lord?" And he answered me, "That depends on what you're going to do with what I'm showing you now." Jesus touched my shoulder, and in an instant we were carried to the top of a spiritual hill, where I saw dozens, perhaps hundreds, of voices echoing over America. But these voices did not come from ordinary mouths. They were prophets, men and women in pulpits, YouTube channels, social media, some dressed in white, others in black, and many covered in ash, their faces distorted by pride and fear. They all said they heard the voice of God, but their messages contradicted each other. Trump is the anointed one. Trump is a trial. The rapture comes before the election. Prepare weapons, prepare escape. It was like an out-of-step choir that made the sky tremble. Each one shouted louder to be heard, but few they prayed in silence. I could see their intentions like colors coming out of their chests. Some prophesied out of vanity, others out of anger, and many out of money. Then I saw something even more terrifying. Angels with covered ears. They stood still, ready to act, but they could not move because the words of the prophecy were being contaminated. The Spirit of God hovered around but did not enter. It was as if there were collective spiritual blockage. Jesus spoke with pain. "When my prophets seek platform more than presence, heaven is silent." I asked, "But what about the real ones? Are there any voices still pure?" He showed me a boy in Ohio, on his knees in a basement, praying for leaders. An elderly woman in Alabama, weeping over a map. An unknown pastor in New Mexico, secretly fasting for revelation. These voices rose to heaven, like golden incense, piercing through the purple mist and breaking through parts of the darkness. And then Jesus said, "The words that change nations come not from those who shout the loudest, but from those who listen the deepest." At that moment, I saw a flaming sword appear among the prophets. It descended from heaven and split the group in half. Half fell into darkness. The other half was silenced. Yes, silenced. Not because they were wrong, but because they understood that Now was not the time to talk. It was time to cry. Then Jesus looked at me and said, "The war of the prophets will be one of the greatest spiritual scandals of recent times, and it has begun." After the vision of the war between the prophets, we were taken to what seemed to be the heart of the entire spiritual realm, a gigantic room with no visible walls, but where everything resonated as if time itself were trapped within. In the center of the room was a pedestal of light, and above it, a book sealed with 7 golden seals. Jesus looked at me firmly. "This is the book of America's destiny, not of elections, but of souls." I got closer, and just getting closer made my knees start to shake. I heard screams, prayers, whispers, lies, and praises, thousands of mixed voices echoing from within that book. When I asked what was written there, Jesus replied, "Possibilities." I saw pages open before me, and in them, like moving pictures, the coming years of America. Each scenario was a direct result of the spiritual decisions of the people, not of the leaders, and Trump was present in all of them, but not as a hero or a villain. In some pages, he was used as an awakening catalyst. In others, as an instrument of total collapse. In one scenario, I saw Trump kneeling before a broken crowd and asking for forgiveness, and it unleashed revival across 5 continents. In another, I saw him being exalted as an idol, and the same crowd, blinded by fanaticism, began to persecute their own brothers for thinking differently. In yet another, I saw him being forcibly removed, and the country descending into a chaos of spiritual civil war, where churches were burned from the inside by their own members. I also saw what would happen if the people did not pray, a scenario without intercession, an America without breaks, governed by manipulation, distraction, and an illusion of freedom that hid invisible shackles. The people's eyes were open, but there was no light in their pupils. It was the most dangerous captivity, that of the soul that thinks it is free. Crying, I asked, "So it all depends on us, on our prayers?" Jesus answered me in a firm voice. "It depends on where you place your heart. The throne of heaven has not changed, but the hearts of the earth have." And then he pointed to the sealed book. "There is a decision that has not yet been made, a seal that can only be broken when my people unite not in opinion, but in surrender." And it was at that moment that I heard something that chilled me to the core, a clock ticking, a deep sound, a warning. Time was running out. The sound of the clock echoed like thunder through eternity. Each strike seemed to tear light from the room. Jesus' presence was still beside me, but something around us began to shift, as if the sky were holding its breath. Jesus said to me, "Now I will show you what will happen if my people remain divided, passive, and distracted." And then I was thrown into a new, much darker vision. It was what he called the Great Spiritual Blackout. I saw the United States plunged into a supernatural night. The sun still shone physically, but no spiritual light was perceived. It was as if the people were walking under a dark sky, blindfolded, groping in the void. And in this blackout, Trump was still in power. But unlike the previous visions, now he was completely isolated, like a king in a besieged castle. Spiritual voices no longer reached him. Prayer had ceased. The few who still prayed did so out of fear, not faith. Around him, shadowy figures took shape. They had human faces, but serpentine eyes. I understood. These were ideologies, movements, and advisors with camouflaged intentions. They whispered in his ears, manipulating decisions like ventriloquists from hell. Jesus explained to me, "When my people are silent, the enemy takes over the conversation." During this blackout, I saw churches transforming into arenas of debate, not havens of worship. Ministries being bought with digital influence. Christians arguing about eschatology while their children are lost in the darkness. And a youth that no longer knows the sound of my voice. But the most painful thing was to see what Jesus called the lamps are off. Millions of people who were once a light to their communities were now sleeping, not dead, sleeping, with Bibles by their beds, but covered in dust. And on top of a spiritual hill, I saw a cross lying on its side, covered in political flags, as if the symbol of redemption had been replaced by temporal identities. I shouted, "Sir, is there still time?" And he answered, "There is, but the price will be high. Knees will have to touch the ground. Lips will have to be silent. Eyes will have to cry." The sky was dark, but in the distance, in a secluded hut, a candle lit, a single light. And Jesus said, "This is how it begins. A light, a soul, a yes, a cry, and then, I light the next one." Jesus led me to a place that seemed outside of creation, a space where time did not run in a straight line, but turned like a wheel of living gears. Each cog in the gear was a day in the history of humanity, and in the center of this wheel, there was a single incandescent point, spinning faster than all the others. He told me, "This is the hidden day, the turning point, the moment when everything can change or everything can fall apart." I looked closer and realized the day had no date. It was as if it were still being constructed by human choices, but around it, there were signs. Many. A global financial collapse starting with OwnClick on a server. False revivals being televised while the real thing was happening silently in prisons, hospitals, and on the streets. A president, Trump, in tears before a mirror, seeing the reflection not of himself but of thousands of souls impacted by your decisions. At that moment, Jesus showed 3 paths that branched off from the hidden day. 1. The way of intercession. The people are awakening, abandoning political idolatry, and crying out again. This is generating an unexpected revival, including within the White House. 2. The path of illusion. Idolatry grows. Trump becomes a symbol of national salvation, but the spiritual void deepens, and moral collapse is inevitable. 3. The path of rebellion. He is removed. The country explodes into chaos. States threaten to secede. Christians are persecuted from within their own church. Jesus said, "These paths are not fixed prophecies. They are warnings shaped by choices, and the choices come from the hearts of my people." I asked, "And if we choose the right path, will there be hope?" He answered me, "Yes, but even hope will have a price." And then he showed me what that price would be. Renunciation, breaking pride, public repentance, love for those we hate most. I saw right-wing believers washing the feet of immigrants. I saw left-wing believers fasting for the salvation of their opponents. I saw leaders tearing up their platforms and returning to anonymity. I saw Trump acknowledging God's sovereignty in tears, not speeches. This is the revival that no one is waiting for, but that I long to release. And then Jesus showed me an hourglass turning. The hidden day was approaching, and with it, the final revelation. The time room disappeared in the blink of an eye, and I found myself standing in front of what appeared to be the end of all visions. An open field, without horizon, where the sky touched the earth. All was silent, but it was a silence that weighed, as if the universe itself awaited a sentence. In the center of this glorious void was a throne, but not a throne like those of men. It was made of light and sound at the same time. It was as if it were alive. Around it, indescribable creatures worshipped ceaselessly. Seraphim, cherubim, beings covered in eyes and wings. And even with all this majesty, there was something that broke me more than anything. God was crying. Yes, the Creator, the Sovereign, the Almighty, he wept. Tears flowed from the throne like flaming rivers, washing the nations with love and pain at the same time. I asked, "Lord, why do you weep, if you are almighty?" The voice that answered did not come from Jesus, but from the throne itself. It didn't sound. It went through me. Because my children have exchanged my kingdom for ideologies. They have exchanged my name for slogans. They have exchanged love for the certainty of being right. At that moment, I saw crowds of Christians in long, endless lines. They approached the throne not with repentance, but with political arguments, trying to prove that they were on the right side. Each one held a sign. I voted right. I defended morality. I fought the left. I have exposed the false prophets. But the plates burned in their hands, and the fire revealed what was written behind them. Lack of love, spiritual pride, vanity disguised as zeal, fear disguised as faith. And then I saw Trump, alone, on his knees before the throne. No crowd, no microphone, no applause, just him and God. I saw 2 paths before him. In the first, he surrendered completely and became an instrument of spiritual, not political, reconciliation. In the second, he hardened his heart and became a symbol of global division, used by forces that even he did not understand. Jesus appeared again beside me and said, "Even Trump will have to choose, and so will everyone who follows him." The throne's tears ceased for a moment. Heaven waited. I understood. The time of choice had come. And then Jesus turned to me and said, "David, you must go back now." Jesus' words still echoed in the air. "You must go back now." At that moment, something in me broke. I fell to my knees and screamed, "But how will I live after this? How can I return to a world that is blind, divided, without realizing the abyss ahead?" Jesus came closer, knelt in front of me, took my face in his hands and said with a love that crushed me inside, "You will not return alone. I will be in you, and your voice will not be yours alone." And then he reached out and touched my heart. A flame began to burn within me. It wasn't pain. It was care, urgency, compassion. At that very moment, I felt my spirit being pulled as if an invisible magnet was dragging me back to earth. The light went out, the sky is gone, and then the pain came back. I opened my eyes as a rush of air rushed into my chest. I was lying on the asphalt next to my wrecked truck, paramedics all around, lights flashing, people screaming. I'd been declared dead for 13 minutes, but something in me wasn't the same anymore. I couldn't live like I used to anymore, not after everything I saw. Since that day, I've been unable to discuss politics, not like before. Words seem small compared to eternity. I can't hate anyone either. When I try, I remember the faces of those who wept in the visions, and God's tears. Today, I pray for Trump, but I also pray for Biden, for Kamala, for all those in power. I pray as if their every decision depends on direct intervention from heaven, because now I know it depends. I pray for the American church not to win, but to wake up. I pray for myself every day that I don't fall into the same trap that I saw destroying so many. And you, who have listened this far, if you think this is just a dream or a hallucination, that's fine. I'm not here to convince you, but if something inside you burned while I was talking, then pay attention. Time is running out. I'm not talking about a cinematic apocalypse. I'm talking about something deeper, a spiritual deadline. America stands at an invisible crossroads, and the Spirit of God is asking, who still listens to me? Who still prays with their heart? Who still loves their enemy? This is the real election, and it happens every day, in silence. The president's name is important, but the name that really changes things is Jesus, and he is coming back. Get ready. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, a comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.